Hello, good evening. Happy 4th of July. Happy Monday. Wait, it's Monday, right? Yeah, happy Monday. Happy Moon Day. So, we're going to read another little section of chapter 14 here, the fourth stage, out of Women Who Run with the Wolves, Myths and Stories of the Wild Woman Archetype by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. Yeah. So, the fourth stage is entitled Finding Love in the Underworld. The next morning, the king comes to count his pears. One is missing, and the gardener reveals what he's seen. Last night, two spirits drained the moat, entered the garden at high moon, and one without hands ate the pear that offered itself to her. That night, the king keeps watch with his gardener and with his magician, who knows how to speak with the spirits. At midnight, the maiden comes floating through the forest, her clothes dirty rags, her hair awry, her face streaked, her arms without hands, and with the spirit in white beside her. Again, another tree gracefully bends itself to her reach, and she sups on the pear at its bough's end. The magician comes close, but not too close, and asks, "Are you of this world or not of this world?" The maiden answers, "I was once of the world, and yet I am not of this world." The king questions the magician, "Is she human or spirit?" The magician answers that she is both. The king rushes to her, pledging his loyalty and love. "I shall not forsake you. From this day forward, I shall care for you." They marry, and he has made for her a pair of silver hands. The king is a wizening creature in the underworld psyche. He is not just any old king, but one of the chief watchers of a woman's unconscious. He watches over the botany of the growing soul. His and his mother's orchard is rich with the trees of life and death. He is of the family of the wild gods. Like the maiden, he is able to endure much, and like the maiden, he has another descent ahead of him. But more of that later. In a sense, one could say he is trailing the maiden. The psyche always shadows its own process. This is a most sacred premise. It means that if you are wandering, there is another, at least one, and often more, who is seasoned and experienced and who waits for you to knock at the door, rap on stone, eat a pear, or just show up in order to announce your arrival in the underworld. This loving presence waits and watches for the wandering seeker. Women are well aware of this. They call it a little flicker of light or insight, a presentiment, or a presence. The gardener, the king, and the magician are three mature personifications of the archetypal masculine. They correspond to the sacred trinity of the feminine personified by the maiden, mother, and crone. In this story, the ancient triple goddesses, or the three goddesses in one, are represented this way. The maiden is portrayed by the handless woman. The mother and crone are both portrayed by the king's mother, who enters the tale later. The twist in the tale that makes it modern is that the devil image portrays a figure that in ancient women's initiation rites was normally portrayed by the crone in her dual nature as life-bringer and life-taker. In this tale, the devil is portrayed as the life-taker only. However, back in Misty Time, it is a good bet that this sort of story originally presented the crone playing the part of the initiator slash trouble causer, making things difficult for the sweet young heroine to so embarkation from the land of the living to the land of the dead could occur. Psychically, this is cohesive with concepts in Jungian psychology, theology, and the old night religions that the self, or in our parlance, the wild woman, seeds the psyche with perils and challenges in order that the human, in despair, drives herself back down into the original nature, looking for answers and strength, thereby reuniting with the great wild self and, as much as possible thereafter, moving as one. In one way, this distortion in the tale distorts our information about the ancient processes of a woman's return to the underworld. But actually, This replacement of devil for crone is strikingly relevant to us today. For in order to discover the ancient ways of the unconscious, we often find ourselves fighting off the devil in the form of cultural, familial, or intrapsychic injunctions that devalue the soul life of the wild feminine. In this sense, the tale works either way, both by leaving enough bones of the old ritual so we can reconstruct it, and by showing us how the natural predator tries to cut us away from our rightful powers, how it tries to take our soulful work from us. The major agent, the major agents of transformation present in the orchard at this time are, in the approximate order of their appearance, the maiden, spirit in white, gardener, king, magician, mother/crone, and devil. Traditionally, they represent the following intrapsychic forces. Ooh. Hey, Cool Gamer. Hey, Pearl. Welcome in, y'alls. All right. The next bits are titled The Maiden is the first one. As we have seen, the maiden represents the heartfelt and formerly sleepy psyche, but a warrior heroine lies beneath her soft exterior. She has the endurance of the lone wolf. She is able to bear the dirt, grime, betrayal, hurt, loneliness, and exile of the initiate. She is able to wander the underworld and return, enriched, to the topside world. Although she may not be able to articulate them when she first descends, she is following the instructions and directions of the old wild mother, Wild Woman. The Spirit in White. Throughout legend and fairy tales, the spirit in white is a guide, the one who has an innate and gentle knowing, who is rather like a trailblazer for the woman's journey. Among some of the Mesomondoc, this spirit was thought to be a piece of an old and precious shattered god that still invested itself in each human. By way of dress, the spirit in white is closely related to myriad life, death, life goddesses from various cultures who all dress in radiant white. La Llorona, Birchta, Hel, and so on. This implies that the spirit in white is a helper of the mother/crone who, in archetypal psychology, is also a life, death, life goddess. The gardener. The gardener is a cultivator of soul, a regenerative keeper of seed, soil, and root. He is similar to the Hopi Kokopelli. Oh my gosh. Kokopelli's been on my mind so hardcore all week. Okay. who is a humpbacked spirit who comes to the villages each spring and fertilizes the crops as well as the women. That's not the story I know of Kokopelli. I used to collect Kokopelli stuff. I don't know. I was drawn to Kokopelli. I have this tiny little book I might read about it. The gardener's function is regeneration. The psyche of a woman must constantly sow, train, and harvest new energy in order to replace what is old and worn out. There is a natural entropy, or wearing down and using up, of psychic parts. This is good. This is how the psyche is supposed to work. But one must have energies in training, ready to backfire. Oh, it doesn't say that. Ready to backfill. This is the role of the gardener in the psychic work. He keeps track of the need for change and replenishing. Intrapsychically, there is constant living, constant death dealing, constant replacement of ideas, images, energies. Excuse me. The king. The king represents a trove of knowledge in the underworld. He carries the ability to take inner knowing out into the world and put it into practice, without mincing, muttering, or apologizing. The king is the son of the mother, queen/crone. Like her, and probably following her lead. He is involved in the mechanisms of vital process of the psyche, the failing, dying, and return of consciousness. Later in the story, when he wanders looking for his lost queen, he will undergo a kind of death that will transform him from a civilized king to a wild one. He will find his queen and so be reborn. In psychic terms, this means that the old central attitudes of the psyche will die as the psyche learns more. The old attitudes will be replaced by either new or renewed viewpoints concerning just about everything in a woman's life. In this sense, the king represents renewal of the ruling attitudes and laws in a woman's psyche. The mage. The mage or magician, whom the king brings with him to interpret what he sees, represents the direct magic of a woman's power. Such things as the spirit second recall, oh no, such things as the, where is are you? As the split second recall, the thousand league vision, the hearing over miles, the empathetic ability to see from behind anyone's eyes, human or animal, all these belong to the instinctual feminine. Man, I'm going to read that sentence again just because it was cool and I struggled. Such things as the split second recall, the thousand league vision, the hearing over miles, the empathetic ability to see from behind anyone's eyes, human or animal, all these belong to the instinctual feminine. It is the magician who shares in these and also, traditionally, helps to maintain them and erect them in the outer world. Though the mage can be of either gender, here it is a powerful male figure similar to the stalwart brother in fairy tales who so loves his sister that he will do all to help her. The mage always has crossover potential. In dreams and in tales, he appears as a man as often as he shows up as a woman. He can be male, female, animal, or mineral, just as the crone. His female counterpart can also affect her guises with ease. In conscious life, the mage assists a woman's ability to become whatever she wishes and to portray herself as she wishes at any given moment. The Queen Mother slash Crone. The Queen Mother slash Crone in this tale is the king's mother. This figure represents many things, among them fecundity, the vast authority to see into the tricks of the predator, and the ability to soften curses. The word fecundity, which sounds like drum talk when said aloud, means more than fertile. It means pregnable, the way soil is pregnable. She is that black soil glittering with mica, black hairy roots, and all life that has gone before, broken down into a fragrant sludge of humus. The word fertility has behind it the sense of seeds, eggs, beings, ideas. Fecundity is the basal matter in which seeds are laid, prepared, warmed, incubated, saved. This is why the Old Mother is often called by her oldest names, Mother Dust, Mother Earth, Ma'am, and Ma, for she is the muck that makes ideas happen. I call my mom Ma. The devil. The devil in this story, the dual nature of the woman's soul, which both badgers and heals her, has been replaced by a single figure, the devil. As we have noted before, this devil figure represents the natural predator of a woman's psyche, a contra naturam, naturam, an against nature aspect that opposes the development of psyche and attempts to kill off all soul. It is a force that is split off from its life-giving aspect. It is a force that must be overcome and contained. The devil figure is not the same as another natural source of of badgering. Why both times badgering had to be okay? source of badgering and baiting that also goes on in the female psyche, the force that I call the alter soul. The alter soul is oppositional and positive. It often shows up in women's dreams and in fairy tales and mythos as a Cronus shape changing figure that magnetizes and harasses the woman into a descent that ideally ends in a reunion with her deepest resources. So, here in this underworld orchard awaits the gathering together of those powerful parts of the psyche, both male and female. They form a conjunctio. This word is from alchemy and means a higher transformative union of unlike substances. When these opposites are rubbed together, they result in the activation of certain intrapsychic processes. They act like flint struck against rock in order to make fire. It is through the conjunction and pressure of dissimilar elements inhabiting the same psychic space that soulful energy, insight, and knowing are made. The presence of the sort of conjunctio we have in this story signals an activation of a verdant life cycle. When we see this rare and precious gathering, we know that a spiritual death will take place, that a spiritual marriage is imminent, also that a new life will be born. These factors predict what is to come. Conjunctio is not something that one goes out and gets. It is something that occurs because hard work is being done. So here we are, in our mud clothes, walking down a road we've never seen, and with the mark of the wild nature glowing through us more and more. It is fair to say that this conjunctio is insisting on a striking revision of the old you. If you are here in the orchard, and there are these identifiable psychic aspects with you, there is no turning back. We are going forward. Now, what more about these pairs? Question mark. They are there for those who hunger on their long underworld journey. Several fruits are used traditionally to represent the female womb, most often pears, apples, figs, and peaches, although generally any objects that have outer and inner forms, and at their center a seed that can grow into a living thing. Eggs, for instance, can connote this life within life quality of the feminine. Here, pears, archetypally, represent a burst of new life, a seed of the new selfhood. In much of myth and fairy tale, the fruit trees are under the domination of the Great Mother, the Old Wild Mother, and the king, and his men are her stewards. The pears in the orchard are numbered, for in this transformative process, all things are attached to, or are attended to. It is not a haphazard design. All is recorded and tallied. The old wild mother knows how much she has of these transformative substances. The king comes to count the pears, not in jealous ownership, but to discover if anyone new has arrived in the underworld to begin a deep initiation. The soul world always awaits the novice and the wanderer. The pear bending to feed the maiden is like a bell pealing throughout the underworld orchard, calling forth, calling forth the sources and forces, the king, the mage, the gardener, and presently the old mother. All of these rush forward to greet, sustain, and assist the novitiate. Is that how you say that? Holy figures throughout the ages assure and reassure us that on the transformative open road there was already a place set for us. And to this place, by scent, by initiation, we are dragged or spirited by destiny. We all arrive in the king's orchard eventually. It is only right and proper. In this episode, the three masculine attributes of a woman's psyche, the gardener, king, and magician, are the watchers, questioners, and helpers in the underworld journey, where nothing is as it first seems. As the kingly aspect of a woman's underground psyche learns that there has been a change in the order of the orchard, He comes with the mage of the psyche, who can understand matters of the human and spirit worlds, who delves into the distinctions between the psychic, this and that, in the unconscious. And so they watch as the spirit again drains the moat. As we mentioned before, this moat carries a symbolic meaning similar to that of Styx, which was a poisonous river on which the souls of the dead were ferried from the land of the living to the land of the dead. It was not poisonous to the dead, but only to the living. Beware then the sensation of repose and accomplishment that can seduce humans into feeling that a spiritual deed or completion of a spiritual cycle is a point where one may stop and rest on her laurels forevermore. The moat is a resting place for the dead, a completion at the end of life, but the living woman cannot stay too long near it, else she becomes lethargic in the cycles of soul-making. Though this circular river symbol, the moat, the tale warned through. Let me get a sip too. Hey, Matrix Man, happy 4th of July. Welcome, everyone. Through this circular river symbol, the moat, the tale warns us that this water is not just any water, but a certain kind. It is a boundary water, much like the circle and maiden drew around herself. The maiden drew around herself to keep the devil away. When one crosses into or through a circle, one is entering into or passing through to another state of being, another state of awareness, or lack of one. Here, the maiden is passing through the state of unconsciousness reserved for the dead. She is not to drink of this water or wade through it, but rather pass through its dry bed. Because a woman must pass through the land of the dead in a descent, sometimes she becomes confused and thinks she must die forever. But this is not so. The task is to pass through the land of the dead as a living creature, for that is how consciousness is made. So this moat is a very important symbol, and the fact that the spirit in the tale drains it helps us to understand what we must do on our own journey. We must not lie down and go to happy sleep over what has been thus far attained in our work. Neither should we jump into the river in a crazy attempt to hasten the process. There is death with a lowercase d, and there is death with a capital D. The one with the psyche seeks in this process of life-death-life cycles as la muerta por un instante. Death for now, not la muerte eterna, death for a long time. Instante. The magician comes close, but not too close, to the spirit and the young woman. He asks, "Are you of this world or not of this world?" And the maiden, dressed in the unkempt and wild attire of a creatura stripped of ego and accompanied by the glowing white body of the spirit, tells the mage she is in the land of the dead, even though she is one of the living. Quote, "I was once of the world, and yet I am not of this world." End quote. When the king asks the magician, "Is she human or spirit?" the magician answers that she is both human and spirit. The maiden's cryptic reply acknowledges that she belongs to the land of the living, and yet is stepping to the life-death-life cadence, and that because of this, she is a human being in descent, as well as a shade of her former self. She may live in the topside world days, but the work of transformation occurs in the underworld, and she is able to live in both, like La Que Sabe, she who knows. All this is in order to learn her way, in order to clear her way to the true and wild self. To delve the meaning of the handless maiden material, here are a few questions to help women begin to clarify their journeys in the underworld. The questions are phrased so they can be answered both individually and collectively. The asking of questions creates a luminous net that is woven as women talk among themselves. And they drop this net into their collective mind and raise it filled with the glimmering, the streaming, the inert, the strangled, and the breathing forms of the inner lives of women for all to see and work with. In answering one question, another question, other questions come, and to learn more, we answer those too. Here are some of the questions. How does one live in the topside world and the underworld at the same time and on a day-to-day basis? What does one have to do to come down into the underworld on one's own? What circumstances in life help women with the descent? Do we have a choice about going or staying? What spontaneous help have you received from the instinctive nature during such a time? When women or men are in this state of dual citizenship, they sometimes make the mistake of thinking that to go away from the world, to leave the mundane life with its chores, its duties that not only beckon but irritate beyond reason, that this is as a sterling idea. But this is not the best way, for the outer world at these times is the only rope left around the ankle of the woman who is wandering, working, hanging upside down in the underworld. The Hanged Man. It is an excruciatingly important time when the mundane must play its proper role in exerting an otherworldly tension and balance that helps lead to a good end. And so we wander on our way, asking ourselves, if truth be known, muttering to ourselves, really, am I of this world or the other? And answering, I am of both. And we remind ourselves of this as we go along. A woman in such a process must be of both worlds. It is the wandering in such a manner that helps to wring out every last bit of resistance, every last possibility of hubris, to flatten every last objection we might think up. For wandering this way is tiring. But this special kind of fatigue causes us to finally surrender ego fears and ambitions and just follow what comes. As a result, our understanding of our time in the underground forests will be deep and complete. In the tale, the second pair bends to feed the maiden, and since the king is the son of the old wild mother, and since this orchard belongs to her, the young maiden, in fact, tastes the fruit of the secrets of life and death. As the fruit is a primal image of cycles of flowering, growing, ripening, and receding, eating it internalizes in the initiate a psychic clock or timepiece that knows the life patterns, and that forever after chimes when it is time to let one thing die and then turn to the birthing of another. In what manner do we find this pair? We immerse ourselves in the mysteries of the feminine, the cycles of the earth, of insects, animals, birds, trees, flowers, the seasons, the flow of rivers, and their water levels, the shagging and thinning coats of animals as they live through the seasons, the cycles of opacity and sheerness in our own individuation processes, our cycles of need and waning in sexuality, religiosity, ascent and descent. To eat the pear means to feed our deep curative hunger, to write, paint, sculpt, weave, to say our piece, to stand up for, put forward hopes and ideas and creations, the likes of which the world has never seen before. It is immensely nourishing to reintegrate into our modern lives whichever ancient feminine patterns and principles of innate sensibility and cycles that enrich our lives now. This is the true nature of the psychic tree. It grows, it gives, it is used up, it leaves its seeds for new. It loves us. Such is the life mystery. It is a pattern, an ancient one from before water, before light, an unwavering one. Once we learn these cycles and their symbolic representations, be they of pear, of tree, of orchard, of stages and ages of a woman's life, we can count on them to repeat themselves over and over again in the same cycle and in the same manner. The pattern is this: in all dying, there is uselessness that becomes useful as we pick our way through it all. What knowing we will come to reveals itself as we go along. In all living kind, loss brings a full gain. Our work is to interpret this life cycle, to live it as gracefully as we know how, to howl like a mad dog when we cannot, and to go on, for ahead lies the loving underworld family of the psyche that will embrace and assist us. The king helps the maiden live more ably in the underworld of her work, and this is good, for sometimes in the descent, a woman feels less like an acolyte and more like a poor monster who has accidentally strayed from the mad doctor's laboratory. From their vantage point, however, the underworld figures us. Oh, one sec. Let me get a sip. Maybe that'll help. From their vantage point, however, the underworld figures see us as a blessed life in struggle. By underworld sights, we are a strong flame beating against a dark glass in order to break it and be freed. And all the helping forces there in the lower home rush to support us. In olden times, stories of women's descent to the underworld revealed that such was embarked upon in order to marry the king. In some rites, there seemed to be no king, and the acolyte probably married whatever imago of the wild woman of the underworld existed. Imago? Image? And here in the tale, we see a remnant of this when the king takes one look at the maiden and immediately, without faint heart or doubt, loves her as his own. He recognizes her as his own, not in spite of her handless, wildish, wandering state, but because of it. The theme of being so without and yet so sustained continues. Even though we wander about in the unwashed, forlorn, semi-blinding, and handless state, a great force from the self can love us and holds us to its heart. Women in this state often feel a great excitement, the kind a woman feels when she has met a mate who is so much of what she has dreamt of. It is an odd time, a paradoxical time, for we are above ground and yet below ground. We are wandering, yet we are loved. We are not rich, yet we are fed. In Jungian terms, this state is called the tension of the opposites, wherein something from each pole of the psyche is constellated at one time, creating new ground. In Freudian psychology, it is called a bifurcation, wherein the essential disposition or attitude of the psyche is divided into two polarities, black and white, good and bad. Among storytellers from my culture, this state is called nacio dos vezes, being twice born. It is the time where a second birth occurs through a magical source. Excuse me. And whereafter, the soul now lays claim to two bloodlines, one from the psychic world, one from the physical world, one from the world unseen. The king says he will protect her and love her. Now the psyche is more conscious. There will be a marriage, a very interesting one, between the living king of the land of the dead and the handless woman from the land of the living. A marriage between two such disparate parties would test the most magnificent love between two people, would it not? Yet this marriage is related to all those picturesque marriages and fairy tales where two energetic but dissimilar lives are joined. The cinder girl and the prince, the woman and the bear, the young girl and the moon, the seal maiden and the fisherman, the desert maiden and the coyote. The soul takes on the knowing of each entity. This is what is meant by being twice born. In fairy tale marriages, as in those in the topside world, the great love and union between dissimilar entities may last forever, or only until the lesson has been completed. In alchemy, the marriage of opposites means that a death and a birth will soon take place, and we shall see these next in this tale. The king orders for the maiden a pair of spirit hands, which will act in her behalf of the underworld. It is in this phrase that a woman becomes adroit in the journey. Her submission to it is complete. She has gotten her footing, as they say, and also her handling, or handing. To have one's handing in the underworld proceeds from learning to summon direct comfort and appeal to the powers of that world, but also to ward off its unwelcome aspects such as sleepiness and so forth. If the symbol of the hand in the topside world carries a sensory radar with regard to others, the symbolic hand of the underworld can be seen in the dark and across time. The idea of replacing lost parts with limbs of silver, gold, or wood has a long, long history through the ages. In fairy tales from Europe and the circumpolar regions, silverwork is the art of the homunculi, the Hobbs, Ver- Dvergar, Dvergar, kobold, gremlins, and elves, which translated into psychological terms are those elemental aspects of spirit that live deep in the psyche and mine it for precious ideas. Hey, Matthew. Hey, that way. Genevieve, welcome. Osimo. These creatures are little psychopomps, that is, messengers who travel between the soul force and human beings. Since time out of mind, the things fashioned of precious metals are associated with these industrious, often rather grumpy ferreters. It is another example of the psyche at work in our behalf, even though we are not present in all workplaces at all times. As in all things of the spirit, the silver hands carry both history and mystery. There are many myths and tales delineating where prostheses magical prostheses originated, who formed them, who cast them, carried them, poured them, cooled them, polished and fit them. Okay, let's look it up. Prostheses. Oh, like magical like a prosthesis. Yeah. Okay. I don't need to look it up. I found the page. A prosthetic. Okay. Among the classical Greeks, silver is one of the precious metals of Hephaestus's forge. Like the maiden, the god Hephaestus was maimed in a drama concerning his parents. It is likely that Hephaestus and the king in the tale are interchangeable figures. Hephaestus and the maiden with silver hands are archetypally brother and sister. They both have parents who are unaware of their value. When Hephaestus was born, his father Zeus demanded he be given away, and his mother Hera complied, at least till the child was grown. Then she restored Hephaestus to Olympus. He had become a goldsmith and silversmith of astonishing abilities. An argument ensued between Zeus and Hera, as Zeus was a jealous god. Hephaestus took his mother's side in the disagreement, and Zeus threw the young man down to the foothills, shattering his legs. Hephaestus, now crippled, refused to give up and die. He fired his forge with the hottest fire he'd ever built, and there formed for himself a pair of legs made of silver and gold from the knees down. He went on to make all manner of magical things and became a god of love and mystical restoration. He can be said to be the patron of those things and humans that are dismembered, split, sundered, cracked, chipped, and distorted. He has a special love for those who are born crippled and for those whose hearts or dreams are broken. To all of these he applies remedies that he fashions at his wondrous metal forge, piercing a heart back together with veins of finest goldwork, making a crippled limb strong via gold and silver overlay, and investing it with magical function that compensates for the injury. It is not by accident that the one-eyed, the lame, those with withered limbs or other physical differences have, through time, been sought out as possessing a special knowing, Their injury or difference forces them early on into parts of the psyche normally reserved for the very, very old. And they are watched over by this loving artisan of the psyche. Hephaestus, that was the end of the sentence. And are watched over by this loving artisan of the psyche, Hephaestus. At one point, he made 12 maidens whose limbs were of silver and gold, and who walked and talked and spoke. Legend says he fell in love with one and petitioned the gods to make her human, but that is another story in and of itself. To be given silver hands is to be invested with the skills of spirit hands, the healing touch, the ability to see in the dark, the ability to have powerful knowing through physical sensing. They carry an entire psychic medica with which to nurture, remedy, and support. At this stage, the maiden is invested with the touch of the wounded healer, Chiron. These psychic hands will cause her to better grasp the mysteries of the underworld, but they will also be regained or retained as gifts once she completes her work and ascends again. It is typical of this portion of the descent that uncanny, odd, and healing acts occur that come from outside the will of the ego and that are the result of being given spirit hands. That is, a mystical healing vigor. In olden times, these mystical abilities belonged to the old women of the villages, but they did not gain them at the first gray hair. They were accumulated over the hard and long years of this work of endurance. And that is what we too are about. The hands of silver, you might say, represent the maiden's coronation into yet another role. She is thus crowned, not with the crown upon her head, but with silver hands at the ends of her arms. This is her coronation as queen of the underworld. To apply just a little more mythology at this point, let us consider that in Greek mythology, Persephone was not only a mother's daughter, but also the queen of the land of the dead. In lesser-known stories about her, she endures various torments, such as hanging for 3 days upon the world tree in order to redeem the souls who have not enough suffering of their own to deepen their spirits. This female Christo/Christa, is echoed in The Handless Maiden. The parallel is further amplified by the fact that Elysium, where Persephone lived in the underworld, means apple land. Ailster, Alice, Alisier, 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 apple land. Alisier being a pre-Gallic word for sorb or apple, and the Arthurian Avalon also means the same. Ha ha ha, apple. The Handless Maiden is directly associated with the blossoming apple tree. This is an ancient cryptology. When we learn to read it, we see that Persephone of the Apple Land, the Handless Maiden, and the flowering apple tree are the same sojourner to the wild lands. In all these, we see that fairy tales and mythos have left us a clear map to the knowings and the practices of the past, and the way for us to proceed in the present. Now, here at the end of the fourth labor of the Handless Maiden, we could say the maiden's work in the descent is complete, for she is made the queen of life and death. She is the lunar woman who knows what passes in the night. Even the sun itself must roll past her underground in order to renew itself for day. But this is still not the lysis, the end, the resolution. We are only at the midpoint of transformation, a place of being held in love, yet poised to make a slow dive into another abyss. And so we continue. Boom. 44 minutes and 33 seconds right now. Man. So good. That was the fourth labor, you guys. I'm glad we did it. I wasn't feeling like narrating today, but I said I was going to do it the next 7 days, and that's what I intend to do. So yeah. Man, it's just so good, right? No wonder you do it in 7 days. No wonder you could do it in 7 weeks or 7 months. Or like that alchemy book, 7 years, 2-week classes for 2 weeks, for 7 years. With no contact with the outside world. I like that. I like that idea. So thanks for hanging out with me. I hope your nights end wonderfully. I intend to come back tomorrow with another reading. And I think Corey and I are gonna go live tomorrow too with some ghost stories. So you're welcome to tune in for that. I love yous. And I'll see you soon. Thank you. Mwah. Until then.